So we have talked a lot over the last couple videos about the life and times of William Shakespeare. In fact, we have dedicated more time to this one man than we have to anybody else we have previously discussed. And believe me when I tell you, we're only scratching the surface. There are libraries of books written about this man and his career. What I hope you have gotten out of this is I hope you have gained an understanding, or at least a basic understanding, as to why Shakespeare is so highly regarded, why it is his name that you are exposed to in literature classes, in English classes, and theater classes. Why it is that Shakespeare is this kind of lightning rod placed right in the center of theatrical history that everything else just seems to revolve around. Regardless of what you think of his work, if you like it or you hate it, no one can deny that the man named William Shakespeare is without a doubt the most important, influential playwright in all of human history. That is, except for the people that will tell you that William Shakespeare was barely literate, a terrible actor who lucked out and became the front for a much more talented playwright and was allowed to attach his name to some of the greatest plays ever written. Yeah, that's right. Believe it or not, there is an entire school of thought that says that the collective works of William Shakespeare, probably the most important collection of works ever compiled, some of the greatest plays ever written down, some of the greatest characters ever created, some of the most quoted lines in all of the English language. Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo? To be or not to be? Is this a dagger that I see before me? Lord, what fools these mortals be! That Shakespeare didn't write a word of it. That Shakespeare, as I stated, was a front man. It was his name. We know that the man named Shakespeare existed. But the theory is, it's his name, but it's not his work. Now, on the surface, when you first hear this, you think it's just another one of these internet conspiracies that pops up all over the place by people trying to stir the pot. You know, the people that think sunlight is an international conspiracy, or the people who claim that someone's going back in time to alter your favorite movies, and the spelling of the Bernstein Bears, and the people who claim that the Illuminati are tracking you with a little pyramid on the back of your dollar bill. But this theory, this concept that Shakespeare was a fraud, it dates back centuries. People have believed this for a long, long time. Now, how did this theory get started? Well, again, we could go into that and be digging into that for decades. But putting it simply, where this theory actually got its genesis is from the fact that, as we discussed way back in our first video, we have no idea the level of education Shakespeare actually received. Now, that in and of itself would not disqualify someone from being a great writer. No one says you have to have a college degree or even a high school degree to be a great writer. But the people who hung fast to this theory in its early days say they did so that because there is information and insight in these plays that, in their opinion, is far outside the realm of a person with Shakespeare's educational level. There is extensive knowledge of English history. There is an intimate knowledge of the inner workings of English government. There are ties to new information and new language that was just coming into prominence at the time. All of this, according to these people who disbelieve this, is far beyond the reach of a man who at best had a 6th grade education. For years, this was the primary arguing point for anybody who held up this theory that Shakespeare was not the author of Shakespeare's plays. However, as the years went on and as science became more available and as people began to look at the works a little closer, we find that this theory might not be as insane or far-fetched as it seems at first glance. And the first major piece of evidence came when we actually took a look at the man's name itself. So let's take a look at the most important piece of evidence that the folks who believe this theory point to in order to justify their suspicions. What we are looking at are the 6 known signatures of the man named William Shakespeare. Multiple handwriting experts have examined these, and they conclude that these all were written by the same person. Take a good look at these signatures. Look closely at them. What do you notice? Well, what I notice is that the last name in particular is spelled differently. The letters are shaped differently. And there are a different number of letters in every single one of these examples. The name is not spelled correctly once. In fact, look at the difference between the first signature, the one labeled A, which barely seems to have any letters in it at all and seems to be spelled SP something something DY, versus the final signature, the one there at the bottom. Note that there is a vast difference, and this is not examples taken from his school days versus his adulthood. These are signatures with only a few years difference between them. Now, some believe that the explanation for this is the man was a playwright, and he was writing out all of his plays longhand. And anybody who has had to do that for an extensive period of time can tell you that the hand begins to cramp up. Think about how much your hands cramp up when you have to write out an essay question. Now imagine writing Hamlet all the way out by hand. That is going to cause arthritis. It is going to cause cramping in the fingers. So what some believe is that this is simply the very sloppy handwriting of a person who wrote for a living and whose hand was probably in a great deal of discomfort, if not outright pain. However, the other side says that no, what we are seeing here is we are seeing an example of a person who had little to no knowledge of how to read or write being taught how to write their name. Again, and these are in chronological order. Notice the difference from the top and the genesis of it all the way to the end, giving it this look of someone who's had to practice how to spell their own name. So, the signature and the mystery of the spelling of Shakespeare's name became the first piece of actual physical evidence that the theory that Shakespeare did not write his own plays had to really cement their stance. And as the years have gone on, people have looked at his work and have begun picking out other inconsistencies. We've mentioned that characters seem to pop up and disappear out of nowhere, that the iambic pentameter seems to switch and change seemingly at random, that the writing style seems to vary from play to play. All of these things which many people just kind of said, well, that's just kind of the way he was writing. Other people looked at and said, no, this is the work of many different people or someone other than this supposed master playwright. So the question then becomes, if Shakespeare didn't write his plays, well, then who did? And why would they get this guy to be the front and to take all the credit and all the profit for their work? Well, as with every conspiracy theory, there are literally no end of suspects. going all the way up to Queen Elizabeth herself writing the plays. However, as we shift through these different concepts and we shift through this different evidence, when it comes down to it, there are three primary suspects that people tend to point to. Suspect number one, Christopher Marlowe. Yeah, our old buddy Christopher Marlowe. Now, we know that Christopher Marlowe was a contemporary of Shakespeare's, and we know that Christopher Marlowe had begun his career a bit before Shakespeare really came into prominence. In fact, as we mentioned in his video, Christopher Marlowe's plays frequently outdid Shakespeare's at the box office. We also know, or rather believe, that Shakespeare borrowed a lot of influence from Marlowe's work, including types of subject matter, the style of iambic pentameter, word choice, things of that nature we find pop up a lot in Shakespeare's early works. Now, where this theory breaks down a bit is, as you recall, Christopher Marlowe died via a knife wound through the eye, the circumstances of which are still up for debate. But how could Christopher Marlowe have been the author of Shakespeare's plays when he had the notable handicap of being dead? Well, there are two trains of thought. One of them is what some people, including myself, refer to as the Tupac theory. The belief being that Christopher Marlowe had a lot of plays unfinished, or just started, or had bits and pieces of them kind of scattered around, and that this untalented hack Shakespeare, or one of the folks in his company, maybe Burbage, got together, pieced these plays together, had Shakespeare fill in the gaps, and called them his works. This would account for why the writing style switches so much in between lines sometimes in some of these plays. So there's that theory. For the other one, we have to take two historical conspiracy theories and smash them together. You remember that one of the theories regarding Christopher Marlowe's death is that he actually didn't die, that he faked his death to escape persecution. This theory holds that Marlowe actually did escape to either America or somewhere else in England where it was very easy to disappear back in the day, but that he kept writing plays. And that for his plays to still be circulated and to still get out there, he made a deal with Shakespeare to put his name on them, and they would split the profits. Suspect number two, Amelia Bassano Lanier, also known as the Dark Lady. Yeah, you remember the Dark Lady first entered our discussion when we were talking about Shakespeare's sonnets, that there is a literary belief that if you put the sonnets kind of side by side and read them together, they actually form a narrative, and that they tell the story of Shakespeare's love affair with this mysterious, never-named Dark Lady. Historians have come to believe that the Dark Lady in question is this person, Amelia Bassano Lanier, who was the first woman in England to actually publish a book of poetry. The theory goes that Amelia and Shakespeare's love affair was a little bit more than that it was also a business arrangement, that she would write the plays and he would produce them under his name. So we see here why somebody would go about that. First of all, being a woman, you weren't even allowed to be on the stage, let alone write for it. Also, there was a prejudiced time against women, let's just be honest, not to mention the fact the Dark Lady tag we believe is referred to because she was African and also Jewish. So there is just a lot of prejudice that would be surrounding this woman no matter how high up she was in society. And so the belief being she actually wrote the plays and gave them to Shakespeare. There's some evidence to support this. You look at the names of some of the characters in the plays, and they reflect back to Amelia and her family. One historian notes that Shakespeare's plays are by far the most musical collection of plays ever created. Well, Amelia was an accomplished musician, and her cousin was an accomplished musician. Her cousin actually composed some of the music found in Shakespeare's plays. Suspect number 3, Sir Edward de Vere, the 6th Earl of Oxford. So of all the conspiracy theories out there, and of all the different names that have been tossed around as to who could be the true author of Shakespeare's plays, this is the one that most historians believe is the most legitimate. If anybody is proven to be the actual author of Shakespeare's plays, Edward de Vere is the man they say it is most likely to be. Edward de Vere's claim to the works of Shakespeare has been growing for some time, and again, we're going to try to condense it down just for time. The reason why people tend to believe it is him, first of all, once again, as we saw with the example with Amelia, we see that instances from de Vere's life seem to mirror instances in the characters in Shakespeare's plays. You'll notice that older women in Shakespeare's plays are not portrayed very kindly. They are either sources of comedy or they are sources of scorn in most instances, Lady Macbeth being kind of the prime example. This is believed that because Sir Edward de Vere had a very bad relationship with his stepmother, and as such was reflecting back. Another aspect of this is, as mentioned before, Shakespeare's plays, aside from requiring a great knowledge of English history, also require a great knowledge of the inner workings of English government, the aristocracy. Edward de Vere, as the 6th Earl of Oxford, would have had first-hand experience with all of that. So it is believed that that's how these plays are so legitimate in that respect. So the question then becomes why? With the Marlowe theory and the Amelia theory, we can kind of see why they would need a frontman. But why would Edward de Vere? He was well respected. He was rich. So why did he need somebody to front for him? Well, there are a couple of theories. Number one, of course, as we've stated, theater was not that kindly looked at. Sure, everybody went to it, but it was still kind of the lowest form of profession out there. And while people at court would gladly go to the plays or have them at their homes, actually participate in them, write them, what a scandal that would be. There is another theory that has popped up, and this one is a little shaky, but it's an interesting concept when you really look at it. If you look at the works of William Shakespeare, particularly any of the plays that deal with the aristocracy and the royal family and history, those people do not come out looking well. Now, keep in mind, this is a far cry from the way the Greeks portrayed kings and that rule of decorum, that you had to meet these socially acceptable standards for a character. One of the big things the Elizabethans did was to shake up that concept and say, no, we're going to show people as they actually are and make them multi-layered. Well, when you look at this, the kings, the royalty, the aristocrats, they do not come off looking so well. They come off looking like power-hungry fools and idiots. The play King Lear is about a king who is going senile and making insane decisions that everybody else around him is saying, this is nuts, and he just keeps going and getting crazier and crazier. Plays like Macbeth show a king murdering to get to the top. Richard III, the same thing. So, is this just an artist trying to tell new stories? Not according to some. According to some, this is someone who is neck deep in the ruling class and cannot stand them. And what he is attempting to do is subtextually convince the common people that you see these people who are ruling over you, you see these people who control every aspect of your lives, They're not gods. They're not appointed by the heavens. They're idiots. They're power hungry, they're bloodthirsty, and they don't care about you. And some believe that he was attempting to use these plays to spur the people into revolution. Now, that is a bit far-fetched, no doubt about it, but an interesting theory when it all comes down to it. So, there you have it. Some of the theories and ideas as to who might have actually written the plays of Shakespeare. Was it him? Was it Marlowe? Was it Amelia? Was it Sir Edward de Vere? We may never know, but the mystery is out there. And as a great man once said, somewhere there is somebody who knows the answer to this mystery. There is someone who will find the answer to this mystery. Perhaps they're watching. Perhaps it's you.